Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today, Thursday's September 11th, 2025 Douglas County Homeless Initiative meeting. Before we get going, obviously September 11th is a significant day for all of us in the United States, certainly for those of us here in Douglas County as well. Yesterday was a rough day with a lot of really unfortunate news. And I would just like to take a moment to just have a moment of silence for everything that happened yesterday and obviously for those lives that were lost in 9/11. All right, thank you for that. Well, again, welcome everybody. Today we do have a nice, robust agenda for our homeless initiative meeting, and really great things are happening right now. But we're going to go into, after introductions, our mental and behavioral health services, talk a little bit about civil commitment, the mental health collaborative, a legal update from Valerie Brewster. Welcome, Valerie. And we have Jeff here as well. We'll do a communications update, which I know Caroline Frizzell and team have been working hard on. We will do our heart update with Tiffany, Sergeant Stephanie Durrell update, as well as the introduction of the new Heart Navigator. Then we'll have our executive committee member updates. We'll talk a little bit more about meeting frequency, and then that will be it. We'll open it up for a little public comment, and then that will be it. Sound good? All right, let's start with introductions.
Testing. There you go. I'm Brittany Lemon. I am the clinical director of our diversion programs over at All Health Network.
Laura Sinconi, Douglas County Department of Human Services.
Good morning, Jason Gray, Town of Castle Rock Mayor.
Brian Briggs, Douglas County Sheriffs.
Darren Weekly, Sheriff of Douglas County.
Stephanie Durrell. I'm Sergeant with Douglas County over the CRT and heart teams. And Commissioner, if you're okay with it, I'm actually going to have our heart deputies introduce themselves this morning because one of them has to go to another already planned thing. So if you're okay with it, I'd like to have them introduce themselves.
I am, please.
Okay.
Tom Breakworth, the Sheriff's Office, been here for 20 years, so.
Only 20 years. That's awesome. Thank you.
And Deputy Paul Staver, I've been here 19 years. I think we came on almost at the same time, so pretty close right there. Been on the team about 3 months now.
Awesome. Welcome aboard. We're really happy to have you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Maria Chano, Douglas County Housing Partnership.
Dan Marlowe, Help and Hope Center.
Good morning, Sasha Easton, Arapahoe Douglas Works.
Good morning, Caroline Frizzell, Douglas County Communication and Public Affairs.
Good morning, Ruby Richards, Department of Human Services.
Abe Layden, Commissioner.
Good morning, Valerie Brewster, Senior Assistant County Attorney. I am the #1 county attorney for all things mental health related in the county currently.
Jennifer Eby, Douglas County Community Services.
Jeff Garcia, County Attorney.
Tiffany Marcito, Heart Team. And I would like to introduce our newest employee, if I could. Thank you. Sorry to jump out of order. So this is Matt Dufresne. Matt, do you want to come up? So Matt's been with us around about 7 weeks. He completed his training yesterday. So I wanted to present him with a heart patch. That's what we give our new navigators after they complete their training. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about yourself or how the training and certification process went.
Sure. Great. Pleasure to meet everyone. Very happy to be on this wonderful team. We've got a team of real professionals here that are very caring, very thoughtful, very hardworking, very committed and dedicated to our community. So thank you for allowing me to be on the team. I've been a civil servant for the past 30 years, working with the federal government. Started off as a Peace Corps volunteer, so my roots are really in service to people. From there, I was with Customs and Border Protection. Then I was an investigator with the Department of Labor for over a decade. And then for the past decade, I've been working with HUD on all things community development, housing, and homelessness. But very happy to be here. So thank you very much. Also, the training has been excellent, wonderful. We've got wonderful leadership here in Hart. And like I say, a wonderful team that's very, very supportive. So thank you.
Wonderful. How about a big round of applause for Matt? You know, we always talk about our heart teams, and just, you know, we're about to celebrate our Heroes Gala tomorrow night for the Douglas County Community Foundation, and you all are some of the greatest heroes in our community. Getting to 4 unsheltered homeless in a county of 400,000 is tremendous, and we know that, in addition to the Handouts Don't Help campaign, it's just been so successful. But, you know, for those that are a little bit newer, or those who may be just tuning in for the first time and saying, why do we have a heart team, and what is co-response, and what is all this about? It really started out of the mental health initiative, and Laura Cinconi and the Care Compact, and this amazing team that had a co-response team working with youth and adults, law enforcement paired with a clinician that had that clinical expertise as well as that law enforcement background to go out and address mental health issues. And the number of diversions we saw out of emergency rooms, out of the criminal justice system, I mean, it was truly amazing. And I think also for a conservative county, it was fiscally responsible, right? We were saving a ton of money because people were not in the traditional systems that really tend to back up and clog up what takes a lot of resources. So we just said, hey, why reinvent the wheel? Why don't we have a co-response model within the homeless arena? And it's not entirely new, but it certainly was new for Douglas County. And this notion of, we believe in law enforcement in Douglas County. And at the time we were developing it, a lot of folks said, well, you don't want to arrest your way out of homelessness. You can't have law enforcement involved in this area. And we said, absolutely not. We fully support our sheriff's office. We know that they're the best in the business and we need them at the table. But it's true. I think law enforcement working on an island without clinicians or case managers can sometimes be very challenging. Case managers, navigators, those with that master's level experience and understanding with regard to the social services side cannot be overstated. What Ruby and her team and all of you do as navigators is deeply significant. But the sheriff reminded us, and we've shared this with others, that having a social worker or a navigator out at 10 o'clock at night in a dark alleyway by themselves, or trying to engage with an encampment in the middle of, you know, an underpass, super unsafe, right, for that social worker, for that navigator. So in addition to that community benefit, having law enforcement paired with a navigator has just been such magic for Douglas County, and we hope for other communities as well. And you all have proven that in a really awesome way. And we love this notion of the two disciplines connecting with one another and being a real team, traveling with one another, engaging with one another, so that the expertise that you bring to every single case really plays out in a significant way. We're not arresting our way out of homelessness, but public safety is keeping us safe. And the navigators aren't just providing resources. If somebody's interfering with traffic or causing harm, or there's a dog in the middle of a median or things of that nature, you really have that public safety element, making sure that the engagement remains positive and safe. So I just couldn't be more proud of the work you're doing. I know this entire team, we've benefited from your hard work on the streets. So how about another round of applause for our heart team? Yeah, what Jen's reminding me too, we have a lot of folks online, and we might not be able to see them here from the room. I just see Kim Smith, but are there folks online that would like to introduce themselves?
Jay Carpenter, City of Lone Tree Mayor Pro Tem. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Jay.
Good morning, Jay Johnson with the Denver Homeless Initiative. Be with
Hi, Jason.
Chief Wilson with Lone Tree PD.
Hey, Chief, good morning. Anybody else online? Okay, we can't see it here, but some really important people online. Thanks for joining us, you guys. So with that, we're going to go into, I believe, the update from Sergeant Stephanie Durrell. It sounds like that's coming up first, so we'll just move that up first with our heart. That's everything? Oh, just intros. Okay, that's all you wanted to do? You want to say anything else? For today. Okay, more to come. Okay, well, we'll pop it back up to mental and behavioral health services and civil commitment discussion with Brittany Lyman. Yeah.
All right. Hello again, everyone. Thanks, thank you. I just want to be able to see my notes so I'm not forgetting stuff. I was creating this presentation, and honestly, you can go down the rabbit hole with these things. So I tried to keep it simple so that we could just have more discussion and conversation and questions and stuff like that. Okay, next slide. I wanted to start off with civil certifications from the street, right? How do they happen? And it starts with an M1. You can't end up on a certification without starting with an M1. And so that starts with heart teams and co-responding teams or hospitals, those sorts of things, right? You need police, behavioral health professionals, or providers to place someone on an M1. An M1 has specific criteria. It's substantial and imminent risk. So these are someone's in active crisis, right? We're all pretty familiar with an M1, but it does start there. After that, inpatient placement, right? Because eventually we're going to need an evaluation by a provider in order to get that short-term certification. So the next step of this is getting someone placed into an inpatient facility. There are barriers that come with that as well. They also have to meet criteria for that inpatient placement. So they need to complete a crisis assessment. They need to meet that criteria for inpatient placement. And unfortunately, a lot of folks will either not meet criteria or there will have some other barriers to inpatient placement. So they'll have medical issues, they'll have behavioral issues, they'll have a history of things that have happened at that place before. And so we have a lot of folks that have kind of exhausted resources before, and a lot of placements, a lot of hospitals will be like, no. Inpatient placement can happen by bringing someone to a walk-in crisis center, or the PEPs or the HCAT teams, which are embedded within hospitals. So a good distinction here is that all hospitals are not 2765 facilities, but some hospitals do have the 2765 designation. And so those are the hospitals that have the PEPs teams or the HCAT teams, which is a psych team embedded within the hospital. So those people can place someone into an inpatient facility. So it's not EDs that are doing it. It's these psych teams that are embedded within the hospitals. So you place someone on an M1 and you get them over to a 2765 facility who can then do that crisis evaluation and placement into an inpatient hospital. And there are a lot of different levels of hospitals, anywhere from a crisis stabilization unit, which is typically voluntary, like I think 3 to 5 day stay. Sometimes it's involuntary. Sometimes people will be on an M1, but be a very low level of care and can go to a CSU. But most of the time, these are folks who are voluntary and just need to stabilize and then go home. And then you have acute treatment units. Acute treatment units are the next step up. So these are typically involuntary and they're staying for a little bit longer, I think 7 to 10 days. But some folks will stay there for a couple of months if we find that they need to go to a higher level of care. So an inpatient level of care, think Fort Logan and Pueblo, right? So these are the highest level of care folks. Usually involuntary care, usually there for quite a while. So CSU, ATU, inpatient are the levels of care that we're looking at to get these folks placed. And there's different criteria for those things. So that's fun to do that evaluation and figure all that out. So we've got an M1, we've gotten someone placed into an inpatient or CSU, ATU level of care. At that point, there's a psychologist or a psychiatrist who can then do an evaluation for a certification if that's what we're thinking we need to do. So they'll do an evaluation. If that provider says, yep, this person definitely is meeting criteria for a certification. And the criteria for that is typically they have tried to engage in services repeatedly and they're not.
So they're refusing, or they're saying yes and then not showing up. They're not engaging, and there's just this repeat of cycling through the system over and over again, and they need help. And so the psychologist or psychiatrist will determine that and petition the court for short-term certification. Up in All Health, our petition is really just a notification for that initial step, for that short-term certification. Hey, we've done an evaluation. This person needs to be on a short-term cert. That lasts for about 30 days and gives us the ability to engage this person in treatment and see how it's going, maybe get them on meds, usually get them on meds, see if we need a court-ordered, a court-ordered medication. I kind of put that off to the side because not everybody with a short-term cert also has a COM, but that can be very helpful. It gives us a little bit more teeth on something tangible that they need to be engaging in. Treatment teams often take a while to kind of onboard and get rolling and introduce to the team and establish services and schedule appointments and stuff like that. And court-ordered medications need to happen quite quickly. And so they will petition that court, say this person's on a short-term certification with or without a COM. It's important here to note that when someone is certified, whether that's a short-term cert, long-term cert, extended long-term cert, the certification is treatment. You are court-ordered to engage in treatment. And so we can, at All Health, and I think anyone who holds a certification cannot hold a certification if treatment is not established. So we can't just say, yeah, we'll take that certification. It's, well, yes, we have the capacity to take the certification. We need to get them in treatment. And so there's a process to accepting certifications in that we need an intake done. We need them enrolled with a treatment team. We need the treatment team to engage with them and set up things. So all that kind of has to happen simultaneously, right? Because we don't want this person to just kind of go in the wind. So certifications need treatment. Unfortunately, it's small, but there is a population where they're hospitalized. The hospital says, we got them on a certification. Can you take this certification? We set up an intake, arrange their discharge process, have a team ready and waiting. The person says yes, and then they get discharged and then they bounce. And so there are a handful of folks that are on a certification and they did not engage in the treatment. And so the gaps there are what we're really focused on right now, is how do we make sure that there's not the opportunity for us to accept a certification, get things set up, and then this person to just leave and not engage in any of it. There's a lot of liability because it's on us to ensure that this person is receiving treatment. And by accepting a certification, we're saying, yes, we'll make sure that this person is going to engage in treatment, and then they don't. And so that's on us, right? And there are a handful that do that. They get discharged from a hospital and then they just go. No phone, can't get a hold of them, that sort of thing. So that is the standard, I say standard, but that is the street to certification process of how to get someone on a certification. So the whole thing starts with that M1 and getting them over to a WIC or a 2765 facility. I would note also in here that bringing someone to an emergency department is a barrier, because if they don't talk with that PEPS team or that HCAT team, they're very likely going to release this person back out onto the street. And I know these folks are seeing, I started as a co-responder, I know. So you're going to see them again in 2 hours or 5 hours or later that night. And so one of the things that our co-responders do, and I'm sure CRT does, is try to communicate with that hospital and that PEPS team. So as the person who's putting a client on an M1 and dropping them off at an emergency department, we're telling that emergency department, he or she is on an M1, they need to get evaluated. Please talk with your PEPS team. And then we go a step further and call the PEPS team or the HCAT team and say, hey, we just dropped someone off over at the ED and we told them to communicate with you, but we kind of want it to go both ways to make sure that that connection is made, so that that person isn't just discharged from the ED and then we're doing this all over again. Okay, next slide. I wanted to plug pickup orders just to clarify, because I know that there's a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but maybe just misunderstanding with the like functional purpose or where it falls in the continuum of care for this person. By the time that we are asking a judge for a pickup order, we've done everything that we possibly can as a behavioral health team to engage with this person. Especially my teams, mine are community outreach teams. So if someone is in my level of care, we're going out and meeting with them in their homes or in the communities. These are not office-based appointments that they come to, and they're being seen by anywhere between 4 and 7 different staff. So we are engaging with this person or trying to engage with this person every single day, every single week. And if we are petitioning a judge for a pickup order, that means that we have reached we need to do something else or else. They are decompensating, and that usually means they didn't take their meds, right? We have noticed that they're not taking their medications or they missed an injection. We know what's going to happen, and we would like to scoop them up and get them re-engaged in services before they decompensate to the point of an escalated situation. Fully respecting the fact that there are a lot of risks and a lot of hurdles that law enforcement needs to jump in order to help us with these pickup orders. So I don't want to get into that conversation by any means, but Douglas County has always been very helpful with understanding this and working with us and talking with us about what's going on with this person and where they're at. And so our collaboration and partnership has been fantastic with pickup orders. And I just like to put a plug for them, because it's not that someone is so decompensated that it's bad. This is preventative, right? Please go get them so that it doesn't get really bad. Okay, next slide. I also wanted to talk about specialty courts. So there is, and I'm really glad that Val, you're here and you'll be able to talk more, right? I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole about stuff that you're much more expert on. But I did want to plug specialty courts because it is another avenue to get someone in a more structured treatment protocol. So there's a whole process of getting someone to a specialty court, which I put on here and you can read through, but it's really helpful for those where there is a community safety part of it. And I love the collaboration between us, and it's kind of what the commissioner was saying with co-responders. I love behavioral health and law enforcement working together because we have different lanes but are working together to accomplish the same goal. So we can worry about the behavioral health and the treatment aspect of it, while the law enforcement is worried about public safety and safety of us and those sorts of things. And wellness court is just another example of that. And so it really gets that interdisciplinary team together to say, what are all the different components of this person? What do they need and how can we help them? And getting someone into wellness court leaps and bounds of improvement. I know there are folks that are unsuccessful in the program, but there are a ton that are. And the ones who are in wellness court or recovery court or our new competency diversion that's coming that we're figuring out right now, it makes such a huge difference. And so I just wanted to put a plug in here about specialty courts, because it creates an environment where someone is monitored and I mean, they are on probation, so that kind of monitoring, but also monitored with behavioral health as well. We see them weekly. We make sure that they are engaged. We make sure that they're taking their medications, and if they're not engaging in some sort of way, that we can address it on a weekly basis. A big component of specialty courts is also the criminogenic aspect. So we spend a lot of time training on treatment for the criminogenic population. There is a whole nother set of behaviors and treatment that is needed for folks who have something like antisocial behavior. That is directly not going with societal rules and roles, right? And so, which is why you get these criminal behaviors. We train for that. We have special treatment for that. We address that, and wellness court is really good, and recovery court is very good at addressing those things as well for accountability purposes. Next one. I borrowed these from the BHA, so you might have to like tap through them because they have like stuff pop up. So, okay. Who knows what an emergency commitment is? It's a really great tool, Flora. Emergency commitments are really fantastic, especially for coming from the street and trying to figure out what to do with someone. So think of an emergency commitment as an M1 for substances. This is a hold, just like an M1, but it's up to 5 days. So what will happen is they get evaluated every day to see if they still meet criteria. So it could be less than 5 days, but it could be up to 5 days. And it happens from detox facilities, so withdrawal management facilities. So for someone out on the street, like a co-responder, you'd call that detox facility and say, hey, I've got someone who might meet criteria for an emergency commitment, and they'll walk you through it. They'll ask you a bunch of questions, and then at the end, they'll say yes or no. And if the answer is yes, then the task is getting them to the detox. That's a little bit of a barrier as well, right? Yeah. So sometimes that means taking them to an emergency department and trying to coordinate the ED with the detox to get them over there. Sometimes we can directly take them to the detox. It can be quite the rigmarole to try and get someone over to the detox. So that in and of itself is quite the barrier. But this can be, I think it's an underutilized process, and it's a little clunky because you have some facilities, behavioral health facilities, right, like Highlands Behavioral or Denver Springs, that don't really know how to navigate this really well. And so if you put someone on an EC and then you take them over there, they're like, we don't know what to do with it. And it really depends on staff and who's been trained and those sorts of things. So the Behavioral Health Administration has really done a great job of trying to saturate our community with that training for emergency commitments. I personally think more is needed. But if you get someone on an emergency commitment and you get them over to detox, this is the route to get them into longer treatment. So if you have someone who is struggling with substance use primarily, this is the route that you would want to take. You can M1 someone, right, if there is a safety component to it in the moment, but an emergency commitment really starts down the better path for substance use treatment. Family members or just an active treatment member can then petition the court for an involuntary commitment. Yeah, let's go to the next one. I want to show you, can you just click till we, oh. I think I did this backwards. Okay. So I'll show you this on a few slides from now, but on the form of an emergency commitment, and this one's really important. Not a lot of people know about this. When I learned about it, I was like, holy heck, we're underutilizing this. There are 2 boxes on an emergency commitment. One is something's happening right now, right? There's a crisis, there's a danger to self because of substance use. The second box is incapacitation. It's cumulative, meaning this person is drinking themselves to death. We have tried to engage them in services multiple times and it's not working, or they're not engaging and they're getting worse, right? And we're seeing these behaviors over and over and over again. You can also put someone on an emergency commitment for that. And that is very highly underutilized because not a lot of people know about it. So definition of incapacitation up here, as a result of their use of substances, they're incapable of making rational decisions. So with respect to their need for treatment, that's the big one, right? How many times have you tried to get this person into treatment or into some sort of care and they were like, no, thank you. Basic personal needs are safety, and then other basic decisions concerning themselves. So if there's a medical component to this, right, they are deteriorating medically, that is also incapacitation. And so you don't necessarily need, if you have someone that you go out to weekly or multiple times a week that you're encountering over and over and over again in its primary substance, you don't need a call for service to initiate this process. You can go out there, you can kind of put a case together. They usually like the last 3 months. That's what they told me. Give us like the last 3 months worth of information. How many times have you gone out there? What kind of services have you tried to engage them in? How many times have they gone to the hospital? Those sorts of things, and kind of present that case to them to get them on an emergency commitment. And if we go to the next slide, I think it'll show, yeah, just keep So these are the same folks that can do, you can request it, right? The detox is the one that does it. You can request it. Okay, next one. Yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. Okay, so it'll zoom in if you keep clicking on different sections of it. So those two boxes right there is what I'm talking about. So they're intoxicated and clearly dangerous. Something's happening right now. Versus incapacitated and clearly dangerous, it's cumulative. So those are the two different paths that you can use for an emergency commitment, and you don't need a call for service or an emergency to be happening right now to do that incapacitated. So if you want to kind of take a step back, gather some information, put it together, and then call the detox facility, and then maybe proactively go out and check on this person and try to engage them in services that way, you definitely can. Okay, next one. I think these are just the parts you need to fill out. You know how there's a form with like 50,000 things in it? These are the ones that have to be filled out. Okay, and then that's the next one. So the last part of this are the involuntary commitment. So an EC, emergency commitment, leads to an IC. Involuntary commitment is a court process, just like certifications kind of. And so someone would need to petition the court and say, you know, here's the story of this person and why they need longer care than just the 5 days on an emergency commitment. And that's how they can get into substance use facilities, like 30-day facilities, 60-day, 90-day, those sorts of things. So it's usually helpful to have a family member who's engaged or someone who's active in their life and can speak to the things that's going on. All right, I did it. There you go.
Get on mic here. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. Yeah, if you can stay at the podium. Any questions for our? Yeah, I'm sorry you're not. You're still in the hot seat, but that's a lot of really great expert information. Questions for our guest? Yeah.
I was just curious, what is the current wait list to get folks into these facilities, either on an M1 or on an emergency commitment?
There's not typically a wait list for I don't want to say there's not typically a wait list. So if we're talking M1s and we're talking about placement into facilities, that changes on a daily basis. It just depends on the beds that are available, who's discharging, who's admitting, those sorts of things. So that changes all the time. There's actually I want to say a statewide website that we update how many beds are available in each facility, but it's fun in the moment, because once you do that evaluation, you need to call all the places and say, do you have availability? So that's fun for our staff in the walk-in crisis center.
Follow up with that. So if the 3 days is up and you're not finding a place, what happens?
So we have a couple of options there. You can renew an M1 once, so you need to reevaluate this person and put them back on an M1. You need a lot of justification for that. So you need to reevaluate and put them back on an M1, and that could just be to buy you more time if you know that beds are opening up like in the next couple of days. That happens sometimes like on a Friday, right? And so you need the next 3 days of the following week. But we can also engage in that short-term cert process, right? So if someone is on an M1 and no one's taking this person, or there are no beds, and we need to find alternatives, doing that evaluation with a psychologist and determining that someone does need to be on a short-term certification at least gives us the opportunity to engage them with the highest level of outpatient care with a certification. So that way, if they are discharged and they were not placed into a facility, we've at least got a treatment team that can try to wrap around them and maybe re-engage in this process again if something happens.
Yeah, Ruby and I are chatting about all these. I think part of the county responsibility and the way that commissioners think are where are the gaps in the continuum of care. And so, you know, I want to bifurcate between those that might have anxiety disorder, panic attacks, maybe depressive symptoms from somebody that has chronic mental health issues, chronic substance use, or maybe dual diagnosis with mental health and substance use disorder. So for those folks that law enforcement is engaging with all the time, or our heart team, that they know this person is chronically mentally ill and or has a really significant substance use disorder, walk us through that, the best way for our HEART team and for law enforcement to engage.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely make that distinction with substance use just right out the gate. So if you know it's primary SUD, let's engage in that ECIC process. It's very similar to M1s where you may need to do it a couple of times until you get the right person who says the right thing. Sometimes that's like getting a family member to engage and help us with the process type of thing. So
What is the ECIC? I'm getting lost in the acronyms.
emergency commitment that
That's
leads
the
to an
emergency.
involuntary commitment.
Got it. Involuntary
I know,
emergency commitment.
acronyms, right? I'm sure you have your
I'm
own.
the lay person. I rely on all of you experts to help me out.
A world of acronyms. So I would definitely make that distinction first. If we're looking at primary substance use, let's engage in substance use treatment more than the mental health treatment, right? That's going to be what's most appropriate for them. Sometimes they merge, like what you were saying, right? Sometimes we have co-occurring, sometimes we just have a situation where it's both. And so if you do need to engage in the M1 process or the mental health process of it, that happens all the time, right? But for those chronically mentally ill, the best thing that you can do, I call it the 10-minute window. There's a 10-minute window where someone will just kind of randomly decide, I want help. And having our HEART team, having our co-responders on the ground, having places like walk-in crisis centers are crucial to that. Get them help right then and there. That's when they're willing to do it, and they're going to change their mind in 10 minutes. And so having processes that you can do right now, and you know exactly where to go and what process to engage in to try and get their buy-in to treatment is crucial. Beyond the 10-minute window, someone is just chronically ill, that's when I would really try to engage them in these higher level of care outpatient teams. So we have ACT teams, forensic ACT teams, so that's just an ACT model of care with folks who are in the criminal justice system. Those are folks with like 12 people on a team that go out into the community and engage with them. And it's a lot of hard work. I would say the first couple of months with a new client is simply just building rapport and getting them to trust you enough to show up to places so that you can start talking about their needs. And a lot of it is starting with very basic needs, right? Like, how can I help you with what you want help with so that later on down the line, I can make recommendations about how to help you beyond what just these basic needs that you're identifying. And so really getting them to engage with those high level of care outpatient treatment teams is where I would go with that. And getting there is the hard part. Sometimes you need to engage in the crisis system repeatedly until you finally are able to get them like on a short-term certification and get them engaged into treatment or into a specialty court so that you can engage them in treatment. It takes a couple of times, especially our unhoused population, right? Most of them are, I hate to put words in their mouth because I don't know, right? You'd have to ask each and every person how they feel about it. But engaging with them, they don't want to make any changes most of the time. They do have needs. They have basic needs, right? Hey, can you help me get an ID? Hey, can you help me reactivate my Medicaid? Those sorts of things. But still from a standpoint of, I'm okay in the situation that I'm in, right? You go up to them and say, are you interested in housing? And they're like, no, not at all. And so engaging them and meeting them where they're at is really important to then be able to later build a rapport and a relationship with them to where you can start working on things that are better for the community as well as the individual.
Yeah, that's our toughest issue is I think it's the involuntary aspect when you have individuals that are chronically mentally ill or have the SUDs and they don't want treatment and they don't want any help. So, and the mayor was really good at identifying this at the beginning of the homeless initiative, Castle Rock being right in the center of the donut in Douglas County with our Justice Center here. Our systemic problem is people going into the emergency rooms or jail, right, with substance use disorder or mental health, and then they get their broken arm taken care of, and then they're back on the street with the same issues, or they go to jail with whatever crime they committed, and then they're back on the street with these same chronic issues. And so the crisis thing is something that the county, with all of our partners, has worked really hard on. We now have a domestic violence shelter for those fleeing domestic violence that you guys have probably heard about. And then we're working on more of the CSUs, the crisis stabilization units that are both inpatient and outpatient, so that you go to the emergency room with that laceration from, you know, a hallucination coming off of benzos. You're not discharged onto the street, you're discharged to that facility that treats them on a behavioral health standpoint. So I think that the toughest thing though is when, okay, they get treated and they say, well, I'm fine. Leave me alone. I don't want your help, law enforcement. I don't want help from anybody. That's that gap that I'm still really wrestling with, and maybe somebody smarter than me can help me figure out how you handle that.
It's fun. It really is. I call it kind of like negotiations. I call it finding a hook. So you need to find what's important to them. And sometimes that is something that is entirely unrelated to the help that they actually need, right? And so a lot of our programs, we try to embed ourselves in as many different things as we possibly can, and in as many different platforms as we possibly can. I mean, Sergeant Briggs and I are working on how do we fill that gap between someone's in jail and might need a certification or an evaluation, right? How do we make sure that that happens? And what we've done is we've put case managers in specialty courts, and we have psychologists who are ready to do evaluations for folks who are in jail, because sometimes it just takes that one person who is just building rapport with someone and meeting whatever need it is that they want, right? I need my Medicaid back. Can you help me find my dog? Whatever it is. And it builds that trust to where then you can take it to the next level. Some of our severely mentally ill, I'm talking schizophrenia and other severe and persistent mental illnesses, a lot of them have anosognosia, which means I have a lack of insight into my illness. I don't think that I'm ill. And make no mistake about it, no one is going to convince them that they are. No one. I don't care what your training is or anything else. It's part of the disease. It's part of the disorder. They're not going to change their minds about it, and they don't believe that they're ill. So meeting them where they're at and saying, how can I help you with what you need help with, builds trust to where then you can take it to the next level and start working on other things that might be more relevant.
Well, a lot of good discussion, Dan.
So client comes in, they're hearing voices. They don't seem to be a threat, but they're just obviously way off. Who should our client managers contact?
I'm going to start here. Someone can be experiencing symptoms of psychosis, like hallucinations, and not be M1-able, right? They may not be a danger to themselves. It really depends on what else is going on, right? So if someone is just simply talking to themselves or saying that they see gnomes in the corner, it's not illegal to have psychosis, right? If you just want to engage them in treatment, like make recommendations like, hey, go here, this is a place that might be able to help you. Our walk-in crisis center on Santa Fe, it's a crisis center, right? So if there's no crisis going on, they may not be willing to go there, like I don't need to go there, but it's also filled with staff who have a ton of resources and can get them connected with an intake, right? Like, hey, let's just get you scheduled for an intake and then you can go about your day. Otherwise, I would just have them call our intake number and maybe help them navigate, like, set this up. Do you have an email address? They'll send you intake paperwork and those sorts of things. It's a very broad overview of a lot of different steps that goes into getting someone into behavioral health care. You can also send them to, I'm thinking about All Health specifically. There's a lot of community resources that someone can go to, and just for resources or something that they may need, but go for it. I see you want to talk.
Yeah, that's when we created CRT, that's for your thing right there. CRT does not need to be called because there's a crime happening. So I responded to somebody talking in the middle of King Soopers to the speaker thinking it was God. It's diversion, right? So if you have somebody show up like that, I responded to Hope and Help. and helped them. And just because law enforcement's there doesn't mean it's a law enforcement action. We're trying to get the navigator to the scene to see if we can engage that person. So I would say you would call, in your case, you would call Castle Rock CRT and see if they're on. And if you think it's a homeless issue, I would start with Hart. But that's what CRT was all about, is the diversion away before that person walks out into traffic or does something criminal or trespasses. So in your specific case, and then CRT will get them over to her at the walk-in clinic, because the person that's in Hope and Help is probably not going to drive themselves to the walk-in clinic.
I know, I was trying to navigate that too.
Exactly. So that's the beauty of it. You have law enforcement involved, but the only reason we're involved is because we want to get the clinician there. So in that case, that'd be a perfect example of why CRT would be involved.
Thanks, Sarge.
Well, and I have to say too that 7 years ago, I guess it was maybe about 7 years ago, my first ride along was with Sergeant Briggs, and without giving any identifiable specifics, it was a young man who had just come out, suicidal ideation, with a whole bottle of Jack, and he was going to drink himself to death in his apartment, and thankfully his dad reached out. But I remember sitting in the car in my suit thinking I'm just doing a ride along, and Briggs was like, "Come on up, you're gonna observe all this." And it was amazing to watch you in action, sir. You did a wonderful job with that situation. Alyssa, did you have a question?
Thank you so much. Apologize. So let's say that I want to complete the thought process is we respond to Help and Hope. The person is nearing homelessness or is homeless, and they are experiencing possible psychosis, and they're not M1-able. And we take them to your All Health Crisis Center. Who would we contact? What would we have to say to be able to get that person the right kind of help without them being told, well, you're not in crisis, you need to leave?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have the number to our WIC? To our walk-in crisis center?
I believe so.
Okay. If you are engaged with this client, they're not M1-able, you want to take them to the walk-in crisis center to get engagement in some sort of treatment, navigating their situation, I would call them on your way and tell them what's going on. You can also wait and just show up and tell them when you get there. But you're going to let them know what's going on. You don't want to give a life story necessarily, but the relevant, pertinent information is really helpful for them. We have engaged with this person repeatedly over the last 6 weeks. They are unhoused. Here are the needs that we have already met or are trying to meet. Here are the needs that they have identified. Here are the needs that we have identified, right? They're unwilling to engage in treatment. Things like that are really helpful because when we're trying to meet needs and connect them with resources or get them engaged in treatment, doing the same things that you've already done is frustrating for the client. If they're having to do the same thing and answer the same questions over and over and over again, they're out. I mean, I think all of us in this room can say, if you have to fill out the same, different forms with the same information on them over and over and over again, it's frustrating. Now imagine having severe and persistent mental illness on top of that, and substance use on top of that, and you're unhoused on top of that. You don't want to do any of that, right? You want help with whatever it is that you want help with right now. And so it's really helpful for you guys to let a walk-in crisis center know what you've already done, what needs to happen next, what they're willing to engage in, what their needs are, what they're identifying, so that we can kind of pick up where you left off instead of repeating what you've already done. And unfortunately, especially with our unhoused population who are severely mentally ill, this may be rinse and repeat a few times. But the more that we're on the same page with this continuum that we've created, the better it is, because each time you bring them or each time that you respond to them, you know what's already happened. Hey, we've already done X, Y, and Z. How about we try A today? Right? When you were at the WIC last time, they worked with you on B, C, and D. How did that help? Was that helpful for you? What can we do next? It also holds them accountable because they'll ask for the same thing to different people, trying to get something specific that they want, and sometimes we don't even know what that is. Sometimes there's a secondary gain in there. And so being on the same page, I would say, is my biggest advice with that, on what to communicate with the walk-in crisis center. That way we're all working together instead of doing the same things over and over again.
Well, Brittany, thank you so much. We got to move on to our next topic, and I can tell that there are still a lot of questions. I think the most important part of this is to make sure that those who are doing this work every day, our heart team, are connected with you. So if you don't have Brittany's information, let's make sure and trade contact info before everybody leaves, so that you guys have that as a resource. That's been wonderful. I mean, even working with like 80 Works and connecting you all, it seems like you guys have those tools. But some of our newer navigators, and even for law enforcement, everyone here is a resource to you. So we just want to make sure you have what you need. Moving on to our mental, and how about, again, a big round of applause to Brittany. That was, we'd love to have you back anytime. Thank you for that. Let's move on to our mental health collaborative with Laura Cinconi. Laura?
Thank you. Before I get started, just looking at the time, I've got about 3 slides of content. How much time would you like to spend on this?
Well, it's up to you. We have a lot. And it's funny because we were talking a little bit about maybe changing our meetings to 6 times a year, but I feel like every time we get here, we have a ton to talk about. So that's up to the board. Let's do an abbreviated presentation today, Laura, and then if there's more for next time, we'll add you to the agenda for next time.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's hop into the first slide. So my content today is where the work of the Mental Health Division and the Douglas County Mental Health Collaborative intersect with involuntary mental health treatment. And to level set for my slides today, I am not going to go into the emergency commitment, involuntary commitment on the substance use disorder side. I am solely focusing on involuntary mental health certifications. So next slide, please. So when I'm thinking about the areas of our work that intersect with this, there are 4 core spaces. First is co-response. Second, enhanced care coordination, which I would put care compact, both adult and youth, in those categories. Because this group is relatively familiar with those 2 things, I'm not going to go into detail there today. But let's focus on number 3 and 4. So mapping the civil cert process and developing a civil certification specialty court. Next slide. So historically, mapping is something that the Mental Health Collaborative really likes to do when we're working with complex situations where there are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of agencies involved, because we want to collectively identify where there are breakdowns and move towards a solution. So particularly for the civil certification process, which Brittany laid out for us, and I think for anyone who's new to this topic, you can really see there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different agencies, a lot of information that's needed to get through. People have to meet very specific criteria, and then there's handoffs between organizations. So the more steps you have like that, the more potential pitfalls there are. And this is one of those processes that can be very, very challenging. So we started focusing on civil certification and the process at the end of 2023. We got a group of stakeholders together from all of the entities that Brittany mentioned along this continuum. And we mapped the process. It came out into these kind of 4 themed areas where we fall into gaps, barriers, and challenges. Legislation, our current limitations of the law and what we can and can't do in civil mental health certifications, a need for increased collaboration, improving communication, and establishing ongoing feedback loops, more resources, training, and standardizing processes and policies. So we went one step further. We didn't just identify the gaps that are there. We very intentionally engaged this group in defining solutions. So we have been chipping away at that list of solutions over the last year, and the 2 areas where we've had the most movement are creating a direct admission pilot with the partners on the screen, CRTs, All Health Networks co-responders, All Health's Walk-in Crisis and Crisis Stabilization Unit, and Advent Health Porter, specifically Porter because they have an inpatient psychiatric unit, which we need to use for placements. So what the meat of this pilot has focused on is expediting the process and getting someone from being identified with a mental health concern that is either currently imminent or is likely to become imminent if not addressed, and getting them into a placement as fast as possible. Most importantly, and something that CRT has always strived to do, is avoid the emergency department as part of that process. So this group meets monthly. We look at the data, how things are going, and it's very much still in pilot form, but going well. We're having more admits, which is great. Brittany talked about the pickup order process as well. I won't go into detail about what that is, but there are a couple of specifics that were consistently brought up as challenges with pickup orders when we mapped the civil cert process. One was a need to clearly define a reasonable use of force in those pickup orders. So typically when a judge orders a pickup order, the phrase would be, you may execute this with a reasonable use of force. And understandably, law enforcement is asking, well, what does that mean? If I have to go on hands with somebody and they don't want to go, I'm trying to avoid a toxic situation here. So there were some changes in legislation at the state in 2020 that crossed out qualified immunity for our law enforcement officers. So there has been some increasing hesitancy to engage in and complete pickup orders. So we have paid very specific attention to defining that in the orders. Also just trying to engage that individual before we even get to the place of needing a pickup order. And if we are at a pickup order, engaging our community response team, who often has rapport and a relationship, to just ease the anxiety around going in for an evaluation. Finally, the challenges with civil certifications are recognized at the state level as well. This is not something that is hyper-local. Everyone, everywhere in Colorado experiences this. So there is a steering committee of state legislators, law enforcement, behavioral health, state court administrators that are looking at this and looking at competency. And one of our working group members from the civil cert process mapping is on that steering committee. So they're kind of our ear into the legislation that's being drafted to fix some of the pitfalls. Next slide. So hearkening back again to Brittany's comment about our focus on maintaining a civil certification once it's accepted, and the effort that has been made to get to that point, which is a lot. We don't want to see that certification dropped, either because it fails to transfer to All Health Network, or the patient decides that they don't want to come to their appointment. So one of the mechanisms that we've been looking at is replicating treatment courts and restorative courts that are typically seen on the criminal side, but on the civil side and specific to these mental health cases. In other states who do this type of model, it's called assisted outpatient treatment, or AOT, and we are looking to build something similar within the confines of our legislation here in Douglas County. It's very novel in Colorado to be doing something like this, so we are paving the way. Denver had run some similar docket like this, which I believe is no longer in operation, but we have a lot of great energy behind this, and I wanted to just share at the highest level the stated objectives of that working group and what the intent of this court is. And for the homeless initiative here, so you know, fully expect and anticipate when this court begins for folks experiencing homelessness to be able to access this. I was thinking with Brittany, you know, one of the areas that we have issues with certs is if an individual is experiencing homelessness and it's hard to get a hold of them, hard for them to get to appointments, that makes a cert really hard to put in place. But if we have an accountability mechanism like this, which we don't currently have in the courts, that would, I think, increase the likelihood that that individual would follow through with care. So I'm going to stop there for today. Thank you, and happy to answer questions.
Laura, thanks. My goodness, I try to think of some of the people, other heroes in our community that have been laboring in the field of mental health. And, you know, Laura Cincone comes to the very top of my mind. So brilliant and so committed to this process. You know, I know one thing we've been talking about with the creation of the new judicial district is having those specialty courts that address people with substance use disorder, mental health, and homelessness. So, and maybe Valerie can speak a little bit more to this as well. But in terms of how that's being rolled out, do you have any sense in terms of you know, next steps with JD 23?
Judicial District 23 is on a timeline to launch their competency court. They need to have that done by July of 2026, so that's a high priority for them. This would be an auxiliary project, essentially. However, we have our processes, we have a draft MOU, we have the partners, and to a large degree, we have the safety net services in place in the community through the Care Compact and co-response already. So we're waiting on our judicial partners to be ready with us.
That's awesome. My favorite story is the executive director of Step Denver, who's very public about this, but he was deep in the throes of addiction and got picked up, went in front of a judge, and the judge says, either you're going to jail or you're going to figure out how to get sober. And he got diverted to Step Denver and walked through the program, successfully made it through, now is celebrating, I think, north of 10 years sober, and now is running the organization. And it's just such a great outcome when folks that are struggling don't end up in jail trying to figure it out, but can be diverted to a program that is helpful. Valerie, did you have more on that?
No, I'm just ready to go.
Well, let's go. Let's get to any other questions for Laura before we transition? Okay, Valerie.
As I get started, I just want to acknowledge I'm new to the county, and I could not be more grateful and impressed by the team that we have here dealing with mental health and homelessness in our community. So legislatively, just real quick, I want to put on your radar that President Trump recently released an executive order sort of acknowledging the crisis nationally regarding homelessness and the intersect with mental health and substance use and abuse and dependency disorder. We're not going to really talk a whole lot about this today because for our purposes today, it's not terribly helpful. Just to put on your radar, there's basically two components to it. One is the initial attempt to stop the housing crisis, add resources, intervention, stabilization to the actual housing situation. And then the second component or piece of it is really the civil commitment process. What you need to know about the federal level in the civil commitment process is we're not seeing any change on the state level as a result of this executive order, because the federal government getting involved on the state level is a lot more complicated than just being able to provide funding for housing, right? You're talking about legislative changes, legislative partnership, and that's a whole different world. So instead of focusing on that, putting it on your radar, read it at your leisure, what I want to do right now is focus on legislative things happening in Colorado and four very important things that I think that are currently happening in Douglas County with our teams and our boots on the ground. Okay, so moving to that, this is specifically in regards to the civil commitment process, okay? There are two different sort of statutory sections that address competency now in Colorado. There's the criminal side of things, so the criminal world, when someone is arrested for a crime, and someone raises competency through the criminal system saying, I don't believe that this person can participate in the criminal process. Competency is raised. There has been a new legislative change and declaration that is really impacting us. In the criminal world, all of that lives under Colorado Revised Statute 16.8.5.111. There has been a new section or series of subsections added to the criminal side that says, hey, we're now going to empower criminal courts to oversect and come into the civil commitment world. Traditionally, civil commitments live in a totally different statute section, right? Under Title 27, the specific numbers don't matter, but what you need to know is that the civil commitment process is totally distinct and different. right? There are different legal requirements, different showings, different evidence, different evaluations that have to be done by the court. So one of the very important things that is happening right now, boots on the ground, is we are dealing with how these cases overlap. When we have an individual in the criminal system where competency has been raised, they've been found to be not competent to proceed, and the criminal court is now going, so how does this overlap with the civil commitment process, and how do we execute that? Us at the county attorney's office are the ones who are responsible for showing up in court and handling every request for a civil commitment. If it's an involuntary commitment, if it's a request for involuntary medications, a long-term certification, extensions, you name it, we're the ones who show up in court. One of the issues that we're seeing, and this is an exciting development on our side, is that traditionally, we're not allowed to talk to the criminal side, and the criminal side is not allowed to talk to the civil side because of privacy concerns and the overlap. So I'm excited to say the county attorney's office is working with the judicial side of things on the creation of our competency court. So for those of you who don't know or maybe do know, we have a specialty competency court docket that is going to be started. They're hopeful to start before the deadline that's been mandated by the state. And then there's also a diversion side. So what happened at our last meeting is the county attorney's office stood up and said, hey, can we please be involved? Can we be a signatory on the memorandum of understanding so that I can actually communicate with our criminal attorneys, defense attorneys, the district attorney's office, and we have vital information of things that are already happening on the civil side that aren't being discussed. Answer was yes. We've been invited to the table. We're going to be allowed to participate in the process. I've been in contact with our partners on the state level. We are the only county in the state that is doing that. There is no other county attorney's office or attorneys who handle the civil commitment proceedings who want to be involved on the criminal side in the criminal process. And I'm super hopeful that we're going to bridge some gaps there. So that is very exciting. Another obstacle, hardship, challenge, something important that I think we need to put on everybody's radar, and I want to recognize Brittany and Sergeant Briggs, and this goes to our amazing reintegration team at the Sheriff's Department in the detention facility. So one of the issues that we've seen with the overlap between the criminal system and the civil system is that there is a very clear outlined procedure on the criminal side to get a criminal competency evaluation completed when someone is in custody, okay? Set up, we have evaluators, there are state contracts, it's a process. There's a wait. Just so you know, right now the average wait for the criminal competency evaluation, even for someone detained, is 1 month. That's remarkable. Historically, it has been 6 months. But I need you to know that typically applies to folks who are facing felony charges. Misdemeanors and petty offenses are a whole nother world that we're dealing with. Okay, now on the civil side of things, one of the issues that we've been seeing is we have a lot of folks in custody who we perhaps would want to proceed on a civil cert with, but there is a different legal rubric and evaluation to be done for civil certifications. We have not, historically up until maybe 5 minutes ago, thanks to Brittany, had an evaluator in place who was willing to come to the detention facility to complete civil certification evaluations, which is a different rubric. I think part of the issue was some hesitancy with not wanting to have to testify in court, because if you're on the civil side and you're pursuing civil certifications, it does require a hearing and going before a judge. And so a lot of evaluators don't love the idea of testifying. I've put it out there that I'm super happy to give anybody training and do mock testimony programs with anybody who needs that in order to be a support for that piece of it. But now we're trying to bridge that gap. We're trying to get evaluators into the detention facility who can complete these evaluations so we can potentially start pursuing civil commitments on individuals who are in custody as opposed to only being able to go through the criminal route. Now, why wouldn't we just go through the criminal route? Well, there is a population that we are currently trying to figure out how to serve in Douglas County that is falling through the cracks. And that is individuals who are in custody on misdemeanors, petty offenses, and low-level offenses. The criminal competency legislation is really geared more towards felony-level offenses, understandably so, right? Those pose greater risk to the community. But there is a whole subset of individuals who we see coming back and back and back into the system repeatedly, again and again and again, because we can't get either a civil certification, stabilization through medication or services. And under statutory guidelines, there's mandatory dismissal times associated with misdemeanors and petty offenses. Sergeant Briggs and our reintegration team is incredibly passionate about this, as is our HEART team and our CRT team, trying to figure out how do we reach this population. Also understanding when this population is out of custody, they're often unrepresented because they haven't had the ability or the resources to go to the public defender's office, get screened, make sure their income meets the requirements, and sometimes they're not even on somebody's radar. So at the county attorney's office, Andrew Steers and myself have been trying to brainstorm ways that we can facilitate understanding our restrictions with HIPAA and privacy concerns to the court for pro se non-detained individuals where competency could be an issue and nobody is even aware of it. So I think that's something else that is critical and important to have everybody know about what is happening. Give me 2 seconds. My computer just died on me, which is fun. There are 2 more things that I want to put everybody on notice about, or one more thing potentially that I want to put everybody on notice about. 1 second. Not enough coffee this morning, folks. Oh my gosh. It would be bad. It would be bad, right? It would be bad. Okay, involuntary. This is the last thing that I wanted to touch on, being mindful of our time. The involuntary process with civil commitment is a whole different world that we're living in, as opposed to the voluntary process. Brittany was beautiful in laying out M1s and the procedure for that and how we utilize those resources. I just want to highlight our CRT team and our HEART team and all of our individuals on our Care Compact team in trying to address this issue and this legislative hurdle that we're seeing, specifically with the involuntary process. So anytime we have an individual who does not want to voluntarily participate, we're trying to explore other avenues and options available to us, right? We run into the conflict of wanting to get individuals help and resources and their own due process rights. Individuals have the ability to tell us no, and the law recognizes that. So lots of other M forms that don't necessarily matter for purposes of needing to know them in and out today, but there's an M0.5, there's an M4, an M3, and an M6, which our CRT team, our HEART team, and our Adult Care Compact team have all been working very diligently on in trying to figure out how we can use those and leverage those as resources and how we can better partner with our family members in the community and loved ones of individuals who are experiencing some of these crises so that we can use those forms and those sources, or I suppose journeys through the system, if you will, to try to get intervention for these individuals out of custody without criminal behavior having to get to that point or rise to the level, or folks who may not be engaged in that. So those are all 4 big things that are happening right now. The legislative shift between the criminal side and the civil side, that's huge. We're navigating that as a team, trying to figure it out. The competency court dockets and the diversion competency court docket and our participation in that, our reintegration team and their incredible work that they've been doing in conjunction with any partner that we can identify in the community. And to touch on just briefly with what Laura mentioned, under the competency docket and this legislative shift, one of the pieces that the Colorado legislation conceived of is sort of outpatient restoration services or outpatient competency services, mental health services. Part of the problem is on the state level, Those systems are not in place yet for the 23rd. They're only in place so far, the funding for Denver and other counties. So literally our courts are going to be ready to ramp up and go before the state level. It's the Bridges program, the wraparound Bridges program is actually going to be available to us here. And so Laura and her team have been incredible, and they've been in communication about, look, we already have so many incredible resources in Douglas County. How can we fill that gap until the state is ready to meet us with where we're at and ready to go? Okay, that was a lot. Hopefully helpful. Questions, comments, concerns?
Jeff Garcia, good hire. Wow. How about a big round of applause for Valerie? You're a lawyer's lawyer. My whole brain is very activated. I appreciate all of that great information because you heard the question, right, which is gaps, filling gaps. You hit that right on the nose. So thank you. I also love the superlatives. First best, first best. I mean, we do a lot of that in Douglas County. So good job to both of you. Any questions for legal? Probably a lot. You might leave here and have some more for next time. Okay. With that, Caroline has been kind enough to move the communications update to November, and we'll have a little bit more of a meatier time for her to engage with us on those. So we're going to jump right to our Heart Team update. Tiffany Marcito.
All right, thank you, everyone. We'll go with the overview slide, please. One more. All right, so the Heart Team enrolled 43 new clients last month. We also exited 44 clients. So I'll go into detail in just a second about how those clients exited and discharged our program. But we had 6 panhandling calls, but I did want to note that 1 was a person that was homeless, not in Douglas County. 4 ended up not being homeless after our interaction, and 1 was an individual that was homeless in Douglas County. We have 0 active encampments of 1 or more. And then we will go to the next slide. We received a total of 224 referrals, 24 phone calls from the public. And with our text messaging service still being new, we had 28 text messages with 12 conversations going back and forth between the teams and the member of the public who was trying to get a hold of us. Next slide, for business engagements, we had 14. And we had 12 businesses that had trespass letters collected from our heart units for those businesses. So kudos to the team for continuing to get the word out about our team and then their rights as business owners. We had a presentation that was done at Christ Episcopal Church here in Castle Rock. They wanted to know more about our team. And then we participated in 2 of the national night outs with the Sheriff's Office. So thank you for the invite for that. And then we had a couple team members participate in the poverty simulation that was put on by some of our nonprofit partners, specifically Manna Resource Center, and they had a great time doing that. So our by name list data for last month, we had a total of 87 who were unhoused. 43 have been sheltered, really thanks to our goals program for getting families in shelter quickly. 38 were sleeping in vehicles and 6 sleeping outside, all singles sleeping outside. So we're actively trying to find housing solutions for those individuals. The next one, kind of a month over month comparison to our summer and winter point in times with those individuals who are sleeping outside. So still seeing that ebb and flow each month with those individuals. Our enrollments, just comparing over a 13-month period, definitely high over the last month with enrollments in August, so 43 again. And then households receiving 1 or more service. We had 68 households receiving 1 or more service last month. So great job to the team with trying to wrap around these individuals with as much support and resources as possible. And then this is just a comparison over the last 13 months, just total services that were provided to the clients that we're working with. So 222 services last month. Could range anything from food boxes to transportation assistance, housing support, mental health resources, and all of that. All right, call types by location is next. Pretty similar month over month. We have 28% Highlands Ranch, 24 Parker, 29% Castle Rock, and then Lone Tree 11% with Englewood and Castle Pines at 4. And here are our exit outcomes. We had, again, 44 clients exited, 39% went into an emergency shelter, 34% temporary housing, 16% remained homeless out of county, 7% into permanent housing, and we had to discharge 4% due to no contact from them. And then just the quick success story this month, Dante Young, who's our heart navigator that couldn't make it today, he's been working with an elderly female since November of last year, had multiple disabilities, living out of her car with a service animal. She received Social Security, but it wasn't enough to be able to get into a permanent housing solution. She did have a housing voucher from another state, so she was working with the housing partnership to see how she can transfer that voucher to Colorado, which was successful. And she was able to get into an apartment last month. And after she toured it, she signed the lease a few days later, and she's doing very well in her own apartment with her little service dog now. So thanks to the housing partnership with your help in trying to get that voucher transferred over. That's all I have. Stephanie or Sheriff?
Of those 6 individuals sleeping outside, are those frequent flyers, or are these the same people you've regularly been contacting?
They are frequent flyers, unfortunately. So we are trying to see what we need to do with our law enforcement partners to get them motivated to take that next step.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I always sit here blown away by the level of expertise and competence. Tiffany, you're amazing. I know we ask you to do a lot of things, and you're doing such a great job. The Denver Gazette reached out this last week, and they were asking, well, we don't get it. How can you only have 4 to 6 unsheltered homeless, but you're having all these hundreds of referrals? And we're like, it's the Heart Team. I try to think as a commissioner where we would be as a county without the Homeless Initiative and the Heart Team and the work that all of you are doing in your fields. And these hundreds of folks that need services, would they be out panhandling? Would they be camping on the streets? Would they be committing crimes in our community? Potentially, right? And I think because of the great work, it's the good news we'll never hear about. I always say that, right? We live in such an amazing community, and you all should be very proud of the work you're doing. So big round of applause for Tiffany and the Heart Team. Great job, great job, great job. We're right on time-ish. I don't think we have anybody on public comment. I will ask for any committee member updates. Anybody from the executive committee with an update? Sasha? The amazing Sasha Easton, 80 Works.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Okay. So it's kind of in alignment with the theme today, but our team created a second chance workshop targeted for those that are justice involved seeking employment. And that started this month, and it's offered twice a month, one in person at the ACC STERM Collaboration Campus and one virtually. So if you do have job seekers that have some type of background, please refer them. And then we also have a large career fair happening on September 16th from 10 to 1 at our Aurora office in Center Point. It's the Center Point Plaza location. And there's a variety of employers, including Douglas County School District and the Buckley Space Force Base hiring. So it's a great event to take advantage of, and it is Workforce Development Month. So just thank you so much for the partnerships with Human Services, the commissioners, your support, Heart. You guys have been phenomenal to work with and make our work easier. So thank you.
Sasha, you have made our work a lot easier. And everybody always hears me say this. I think the best form of welfare is a job, right? So much better than government assistance. Somebody having that paycheck that they can rely on is everything. So you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you for just being here with us. We really appreciate it. Any additional executive committee member updates? Okay, well, with 1 minute to spare, we lost the minutes, 10:30 exactly. But I did want to ask, I know we've had a lot of discussion today, but I want to be very respectful of your time. One thing that we've been talking about internally as a county is maybe changing our meetings to 6 times a year as opposed to 12, We always seem to have a lot to talk about. I'm frankly open to either, but wanted to really bring it to this group for any input, thoughts, comments. Are we liking meeting every month? Should we move it to every other month? Sheriff. We should. Well, Wildfire Action Collaborative has Firehouse subs, so we could probably do better about that here. Yeah.
I'd be in favor of 6 times a month, and if there's something pressing or
6 times a
something,
month.
or I'm sorry, 6 times a year.
That's an ambitious sheriff. Right
That's
there.
my schedule lately. I think I would be in favor of that, reducing the amount of meetings unless we have something, an issue to specifically address.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheriff. Mayor, I see nodding heads maybe. Anybody else on that? Okay. Well, I'll just ask, is anybody opposed to moving our meetings to 6 times a year versus 12? All right, then I think that's what we'll do. Our next meeting then will be in November. I just again want to thank everybody so much for participating with us. Let me open it up for any other public comment. Do we have any comment from anybody? Okay. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Thanks.